Local news that matters on Local 22 News.
At this place in history, we're in Burlington's South End at Oakledge Park with Executive Director of the Vermont Historical Society, Steve Perkins. Steve, what brings us here today?
Well, other than getting wet in the rain, Amanda, we're going to talk about the history of this area that's now called Oakledge Park.
So when does this start for us?
Like way back, like 1793.
Wow.
So kind of the first Europeans that ended up in this space decided this was a really good spot for a farm, kind of a little protected cove, and eventually a good spot for a shipyard. And they started building boats in what's now called South Cove, which is now private property, but right south of us where we're standing now. So over time, it attracted some interest, and that especially from a wealthy guy named Dr. William Seward Webb. You may know him as the owner or builder of Shelburne Farms.
Right.
This was the first property that he bought.
Okay.
Because he was able to put his yacht in South Cove, where the old shipyard was. And he built a cottage, we would probably call it a mansion today, that he called Oakledge. He lived there for a number of years before he decided the property on Shelburne Point was nicer, and he started building Shelburne Farms that we know today, and he gave the property to his daughter, who really kind of lived here off and on until the 1920s. She was approached in 1925 by the founders of the Burlington Country Club. They were looking for a place for the country club, and they thought this would be perfect because they could have a golf club and a yacht club on one location. She turned him down.
Oh.
She said no, but then a year later sold the property to a group of Burlington businessmen, and they started to chop it up into housing lots and camp lots until a guy named Alan Beach ultimately decided to turn it into a resort. And it became Oakledge Manor. They called it a resort for all seasons. And you could come stay here. There was, of course, the mansion, which was turned into kind of like a clubhouse, and then cottages along the lake. You can see ruins of those now, and stables, the old Webb stables, so people could take out horses. And they had a golf course here, and they had tennis, and they had sailing. And it served as a resort really up until the early 1970s.
So then what takes us from the end of that resort period to what we have today, which is a park that a lot of people love to come and enjoy?
So I think in the kind of the late 60s, people stopped going to these resorts as much. The ownership of the resort decided to sell it to the City of Burlington to turn into a park. Now, the original acreage had shrunk considerably, so a whole section of what was the old property was sold to gas companies, and those gas tanks are still down there. A whole northern part or southern part of the property was sold to Mr. Austin, who had an estate there. It's now Red Rocks Park. The core here was sold to the City of Burlington. Unfortunately, a year before it was sold, the owners of the resort allowed the City of Burlington Fire Department to use the manor building and the stables and everything else as a training facility. And they burned down all of the infrastructure that was here. I know every preservationist's nightmare. But if you go and you walk around this park, there's some great signage telling you what used to be here, but you can see evidence. You can see foundations, you can see pins stuck in the rocks where boats were moored, and even chimneys poking out of the woods. And so that's the history of this site. I think it's pretty cool.
At this place in history.